And we're back again. My Chamber TV. Welcome in, everyone. It's great having you with us again. I'm Barbara Marville Kelly, and with me is Paul Friedlander.
Yes, ma'am, I am. With
You are. And
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome
Happy New Year.
to
If you're just
2020.
Yeah, 2020.
Everybody's going to be smarter this year because they're going to have 2020 hindsight.
Oh boy.
See?
Oh,
It's my
I've
co-host.
been saving this stuff up.
That's great. That's really great.
Barb goes, keep saving it, please.
I know, right? So we have Rain Johns with Rain Johns Law, and I was talking to you just before the show. Very, very interesting, your work. So welcome
you.
to the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is
We're excited.
awesome.
Now, when we first met, you actually were not employed by yourself, but what did you when we first met, what were you doing?
When we first met, I was the CEO at the Coalition for the Homeless
Homeless.
here in Pasco County, and
Yes.
I did that for approximately 2 years.
Yep.
Really?
And you started your career in law doing what?
I started my career at the Public Defender's Office, a proud assistant public defender for 13 years. I was a senior assistant public defender. I was the only attorney there that actually I practiced civil law because I did all of the Baker Acts, and I also did the homeless outreach, which also was some of the criminal too. And I was in charge of the entire Sixth Circuit for Baker Acts and for mental health and homeless outreach for several years.
Jeez. So
What
you've got
is-
real well-rounded. Now that you're the law offices of Rain Johns, what's your specialty?
Well, going back to the coalition, though, the
Please.
reason that I left is because I did great work there. I was
You
able
did.
to double the revenue. I
Yep.
realigned things, things that are still in process today. However, what I wasn't able to do was help people directly. And it was hard because
Yeah.
I would hear clients in the waiting room and I had to work on a grant or administrative, and I knew how to help them and I couldn't.
Because of your yeah.
Exactly.
See, I was just going to ask you, what is the backstory? What drove you into this driving force? And you just answered my questions. You wanted to. So how does that make you feel working with people directly? My goodness gracious, that's a lot.
I love it though. That's what I'm good at. That's where my passion is. I like to connect with my clients, with their families, doing elder law and estate planning. Of course, we have a client or the couple or the single person, but we also have to work with the entire family and the family dynamics and bringing everyone together and making
Family
sure
dynamics.
that, which can be interesting, but making sure that the overall concern, both legally and within the family, is for the client.
Nice, very nice.
That's awesome.
You can see that you just beam fulfilling your passion. And
Thank you. I love it.
And you fit right into the community. We were talking earlier on about the heartbeat of the Pasco County area. I mean, there's just so many wonderful people that give back in the community. And looks like you're definitely
Yeah.
on your road to success here for sure.
Yes. And and you may have mentioned, I apologize if it went, but how did you, when you said you were when you were in the public defender's office, to get into that line, was there anybody else even doing that, the Baker Act side of things and the homeless side of things, or?
They were doing it before I did, because previously, before I started doing Baker Acts in the Public Defender's Office years ago,
Yes.
it would be a short-term rotation. So what was happening is that there would be attorneys that were doing it that were taught by attorneys who only did it for a short time. And when Bob Dellinger, who's still the elected public defender for the Sixth Circuit, when he put me there, he brought me into the office and he's sitting in the big chair and I'm on the other side of the big desk, and he said, "Young lady, I expect you to win some Baker Acts because we're not winning." And he knew that I had the passion for it.
Yeah.
And I didn't win a single Baker Act case for 6 months. 6 months, because we really had to teach the judicial system, the hospitals, the families, the facilities, that we were serious about representing the mental health clients. And after I won my first appeal, that was it. Then I started winning.
Then you really, yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. So can you walk us through the Baker Act? You were asking questions earlier on about the time frame and just who is a candidate to be Baker Acted?
Okay, so in Florida, under the Florida Mental Health Act, which we call the Baker Act, which
Right.
is very confusing because when we say somebody was Baker acted, it could be by law enforcement, it could be from a judge. So we use the same name for everything. And I can almost compare it to the Alaskans with snow. They have, what, several hundred words for snow
Gotcha.
for the different variations. But in Florida, we only have one word for pretty much the entire mental health process, which really adds to the confusion.
Oh, yeah.
So in order to be Baker acted in Florida, the person has to be a danger to themselves or to others and or be unable to take care of themselves. So it's not necessarily just one, it could be several or all of those elements. And I ask often, like, how long is a Baker Act for? In fact, do you know, Paul? How long?
72 hours?
72 hours. So that's actually not correct.
Okay.
But that's what
most people think,
That's
though,
the
right?
common belief in Florida, that it's 72 hours, and people will say, "Oh, my 72 hours are up. I'll be released now." I was like, "No, actually, you're not." So the 72 hours is really a filing deadline that the hospitals have. So if the hospital wants to hold the person past 72 hours,
have to.
excluding weekends and holidays, they have to file prior to the expiration of the 72 hours. And they have some other responsibilities as well. The person has to be seen within a certain amount of time, and it has to be documented. But really, it's a filing deadline. And a person in Florida can technically or legally, somebody can be held for the rest of their life under a Baker Act. It's that serious and that long, but it's at 6 months interval. So at the expiration of the 6 months, it has to go before the judge again, but it could happen perpetually.
Gotcha. And so is the 72 hours in hospital terminology, is that more, are they there under observation at that point, or are they inpatient?
It depends on the person.
Okay.
Somebody
All right.
could hit the doors, they can sign in voluntarily.
Yep.
Somebody can, the hospital might realize that they just need to be released. There's some family dynamics going on. Maybe they just want the family and the patient to calm down. So there's all sorts of variations on the legal status.
And
it
here's
really
my
depends
confusion.
on
I
the
got to ask you,
profession.
what is winning a Baker Act case? What
I
does
was
that
wondering
mean?
the same thing. Yeah, right. Who's the winner here?
Yeah, what were you, who, were you defending the patient?
I was defending the patient.
Okay.
I laughed at that because that a lot of us in the system for mental health, we talk about the fact there really is no win.
That's
You don't win either way.
right.
So if I get somebody out, at that time at the public defender's office, if I got somebody out who really needed to be held longer, and I got them out, then they weren't getting the treatment they needed. I mean, I won as far as due process and
Right.
social justice.
Gotcha.
Right.
Was it a win for the family? Not always. Sometimes, but not always. So it's hard to say what a win was.
So does a Baker acted person, do they automatically go under the public defender's office right away, or is that just dependent on the situation?
That's another great question. In the Sixth Circuit, they automatically go under the public defender's office for indigent services.
Okay.
Technically, it's supposed to be somebody who can't afford to pay for legal counsel, but if the hospitals are holding them in and saying that they can't make a decision and that they lack capacity, basically at that point, then is it fair for us to rely on their statements of wealth or lack thereof to
Right.
decide if they should have an attorney?
And so are you, as soon as somebody goes into, say, a Baker here and they're Baker acted, is their next step, the hospital's next step, to contact your office
The
immediately?
clerk of court does that.
Okay. But the
So-
hospital has to notify somebody.
So the
now.
hospital they have the 72-hour filing deadline.
Right.
And when the clerk receives that, they're set for a hearing,
Okay.
and the public defender's office is notified. And at this point now, for me as private counsel, sometimes the families will call me, and I'll represent the family, not necessarily the person who's been Baker acted, because the family realizes the person's about to be released at the hearing, and they're saying,
What do we
they're
do?
spending too much money, they're acting erratically, maybe starting to show signs of dementia. Can you help them get held longer for treatment?
And that's got to be such a fine line, but what?
That's what I'm
Yes,
thinking,
It's
too.
got to be such a fine line,
Ooh.
but how do you, let's say that let's say it's a 25, 30-year-old that's got senior parents whose parents are in their 60s or 70s, and it's just out of control. And yet they get defended and they're going to be released. How do you help those people that are just can't control it anymore? What happens to that person in the system?
It really depends on the symptoms that they're having.
Okay.
Because somebody who can't be controlled anymore, perhaps they need to go to an assisted living facility.
Okay.
And that's a way that I can help them, that I practice elder law now, which
Right.
includes mental health. But I can help with asset protection. We can help getting them set up for long-term care. And if they have some capacity, because capacity is in flux, and if they're able to, one of the first things we would want to do is get them to get a healthcare surrogate. We want to get the family involved. We want to have a surrogate appointed. We want to do those things. We want a HIPAA authorization, especially when we see that the dementia is starting or a severe mental illness, it's starting,
Right.
but they can still make decisions. So it's very important that they get those advance directives in.
Well, I see we're winding down. I could ask them.
Oh, I know.
This
This
has
is
been
so
great. I could stay here for another
fascinating.
12 or 15 minutes.
I've learned more from
Yes.
you just
you.
now on the Baker Act and the process. I have a million more questions myself.
Well, I can tell you that I'm working on a book on the
Oh,
Baker Act.
oh, good.
And it's difficult, but I'm making sure that I'm writing it at a level that everyone can understand.
Very
Nice.
nice.
Because I get so many questions about the Baker Act.
Sure.
That's
sure.
awesome. That is awesome. Well, Happy New Year as we start to wind down.
Yes.
How do they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me through my office, 727-645-5784. And they can also get a hold of me through the website, which is rainjohnslaw.com.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us
you.
today. This has been very enlightening.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you for joining us too. And if you want to know more information about the Baker Act and the different things that we've been talking about
You've been a
today,
member of Chamber for how long?
2 years now.
2 years
I think.
now.
2 years.
That's awesome. So she's not new. So you do elder law. Do you also work with people that have disability situations too?
I do. So
Okay.
elder law, and the
We're
reason
winding-
that
we're
I
winding out. I just wanted to
Oh,
get you to
yes,
say
I
that you
do.
do. Okay.
and veterans
Thank you so
benefits.
much for being on.
thank you,
We
dear one.
appreciate it.
We'll be right back.